cut her head off and put it into a Hello Kitty stuffed animal. You asked and you shall receive. It's time to cover the Hello Kitty murder. In 1999, a 14-year-old girl walked into a Hong Kong police station. She had a rather peculiar story. She said that the ghost of a woman was haunting her and wanted her to go to the police. Of course, at first the police were like, "Why are you coming to me with a ghost story? We're not the ghost patrol." But the girl soon explained that the ghost that was haunting her was a woman whose murder and torture she was involved in. There is a lot to go over here, so let's get into it. First, trigger warning. If you do not like gory cases, turn this video off. This is not for you. To make any of this make sense, we have to go back to the beginning. Fan Man Yi is our unfortunate victim, and she had a really horrible life, to say the least. Her parents abandoned her at a very young age, and she grew up in a series of orphanages and girls' homes. By the time she was a teenager, she was already addicted to drugs, and she got into sex work and prostitution to be able to afford her addiction. At 23 years old, she started working as a hostess at a nightclub. This is where she met 34-year-old Chan Man Lok. As a pimp and drug dealer, he was not the man you wanted to mess with. Some people say that he was in or had connections to the triad. Fan stole from Chan when she was desperate for money in 1997. She took his wallet. In search of a punishment for her, he had two of his henchmen kidnap her and bring her back to an apartment. This is where Fan would endure a month of merciless torture. Any horrible things you can think of, she went through it in this month. One morning, Chan woke up and Fan was dead. Of course, they said, "Oh, it was a drug overdose." Yeah, that makes sense. No, she 100% succumbed to her injury after a month of what these men did to her. So this horrendous human being over here cut up her body and boiled her flesh to get rid of the rotting meat smell, and boiled her head. They cooked her flesh on the same stove that they were cooking their meal and stirred it with the same utensils that they were stirring their meal. Ugh. Ugh. So after all of this was done, they put her skull inside of this Hello Kitty mermaid stuffed animal. Ugh. This one right here. The apartment, weirdly enough, was filled with Hello Kitty memorabilia. Thus, this murder was called the Hello Kitty murder. Part 2 up right away. Hello Kitty murder is just horrendous. So basically, a 14-year-old girl went to the police department and she said, "I was involved in these murders and this torture." But how was she involved? A girl that has long since remained anonymous. When she was 13 years old, she started dating 34-year-old Chan. This guy right here. Yep, the murderer. And he had her partake in some of the things that they did to Fan. So in exchange for protection, she testified against them. And the police were able to find enough evidence in the apartment to link all three men back to Fan's murder. They even kept Fan's organs in bags and a few of her teeth. It was just gruesome. So yeah, they were sentenced to life with possibility of parole after 20 years. It's been, does anyone know if these men are free on the streets? Because I can't find any information on it. That's concerning. Let's talk about it in the comments. Let's go.
Casey Woody was 13 years old when she started using online chat rooms in 2002. Living in a small town just outside of Greenbrier, Arkansas, most phone calls were long distance, so these chat rooms were the only way that Casey could talk with her best friends Jessica and Sam after school. One night at a sleepover, the three girls decided to join the Yahoo Christian Teen chat room in hopes of meeting their future husbands. Casey immediately hit it off with this user called Jazzman_DF. The two chatted every single day for hours. But Jazzman's real name was Dave Fagan. He was a 17-year-old boy living in San Diego, California. It was all just fun and friendly at first, but then they realized that they were connected on a much deeper level. Dave's aunt, who actually lived near Casey in Arkansas, had been in an awful car accident that left her in a coma. Dave was absolutely distraught because this aunt was more like a mother to him, and Casey unfortunately understood his pain. When she was about 7, her and her family were in an awful car accident that took the life of her mother. So talking with Dave was therapeutic for 13-year-old Casey. It was like finally someone could understand and see her. And this bonded the two teenagers. But then Casey met Scott, a 17-year-old high school football player from Alpharetta, Georgia, and the two quickly began their long-distance dating relationship. She told Dave about Scott, and he wasn't mad as long as Casey promised that they would stay best friends. So, to prove her loyalty to Dave, she added him to a group chat with Scott, Jessica, and Sam. Well, one night, Jessica and Casey were having a sleepover at Casey's house, and they were talking on the phone with Dave. They were home alone because Rick, Casey's dad, was a police officer that worked the late night shift, and Casey's brother, along with his best friend Eric, who was living with the Woodies at the time, they were hanging out with friends. So they're talking on the phone when they hear footsteps outside Casey's window. Like I said, she lives out in the middle of nowhere, so foot traffic isn't a thing. The two start freaking out. They close all of the curtains, turn off the lights, and even take Casey's dresser and barricade themselves in the room by blocking the door with it. They're being as quiet as they can on the phone with Dave when they hear the sound of the kitchen floorboards creaking. Someone was in the house. Dave was trying to calm them down like, "Oh, it's fine, you're just being dramatic." And the noises finally stopped. But there were just some things off about Dave. He used words like groovy. The girls just wrote this off thinking like, oh, it's just a West Coaster thing. But Scott's dad knew something was off when he heard that his son was on the phone with an old man. When I tell you I wish this was the end of the story, I'm not kidding. Part 2 is on the playlist below. Part 2 of Casey Woody. On Tuesday, December 3rd, 2002, Casey and her best friend Sam were hanging out at Casey's locker when Sam noticed a photo of a boy hanging by a magnet. It was Scott, Casey's boyfriend. Sam then asked how Casey got this photo, and Casey told her that Scott mailed it to her. Sam freaked out, reminding Casey that it's against the rules to send someone you meet online your address or phone number, no matter how well you think you know them. This created a massive argument, so much so that the school's guidance counselor had to get involved. She sat the girls down and let them hash it out, and then reminded Casey that what she was doing was careless and dangerous. In the end, the best friends reconciled and moved on with their day. After this, Casey asked Sam if she could spend the night at her house that night. Sam said no because it was a school night and that's never allowed. So Casey went and asked her other best friend, Jessica, and many others if she could stay the night, and they all said the same. It was a school night. Casey wasn't upset or mad, so she hopped on her bus at the end of the day, hugged her friends goodbye, and left to go home. Once she got home, Casey ate the dinner that her father left for her, took a shower, put on her favorite PJs, hopped on her computer and began messaging Scott and talked on the phone with Dave. Casey told Scott all about her day and then let him know that Dave was actually on his way to Arkansas because his aunt's condition had worsened and she was being taken off life support. Casey kept Scott company on his drive and reassured him that it was going to be okay because she knew her mom and his aunt would be best friends in heaven. She was relaying all of this to Scott when her messages just stopped coming through. Scott responded over and over again, but he wasn't getting anything back. He started calling her house, emailing her friends, doing anything he could to get her to answer because he felt like something was wrong. Eric, Tim's friend who was living with the Woodies, got home at around 10:15 from class. He started his laundry and got ready for bed, and Tim came home at 11:30 p.m. when they realized that Casey was nowhere to be found. So they called their dad, Rick, only to realize that he had no idea where Casey was either. Tim and Eric were calling anyone they could think of to try to find Casey, and Rick was rushing home. Casey was missing, leaving behind her glasses that had been shattered on the floor of the house, her shoes and jacket, and an obviously tampered door. The FBI, state police, and local law enforcement worked together to begin the investigation to find Casey Woody, which is when they learned about Scott and Dave. Agents in Georgia were able to confirm Scott's identity and alibi, but who was Dave Fagan? Well, he doesn't exist. But Dave Fuller does, a 47-year-old man from San Diego, California. And using his credit card, they were able to track him down. Final part is in the playlist below. Final part of Casey Woody. David Fuller was a 47-year-old man from San Diego, California, who they were able to confirm to be in the area, just miles away from Casey's home. In Conway, Arkansas, he had rented a hotel, a car, and a storage unit. On December 4th, FBI and local law enforcement officers got a search warrant and arrived at the Guard Smart storage unit that Fuller rented. The door to the unit was shut, but it was unlocked. Sergeant Jen Barrett was able to open the door enough to see that the minivan had been backed into the unit and it was on and running. But before he could fully open the door, a shot rang out. Officers ran for cover and immediately called for backup. The SWAT team arrived just moments later and stormed the unit. And it was gruesome. Inside, they found Casey's body. She had been chained to the four corners of the minivan, and Fuller's lifeless body was laying nearby. Fuller had snuck into Casey's home and watched her as she sat at her computer chair. He then rushed up behind her and forced a chloroform rag into her mouth before taking her out of the house into his minivan and driving to the storage unit. Once there, he chained her up and did the unimaginable to a 13-year-old little girl. It was later discovered that Fuller had taken 3 different trips to Conway, meaning that when Jessica and Casey heard the floorboard creak in the kitchen that night, it was Dave in Casey's house. He had notebooks filled with information about Casey, her dad, her brothers, their friends, everyone. He was a freaking monster. After Casey's death, her family and friends founded the Casey Woody Foundation, a nonprofit designed to teach parents and children about internet safety. Please share Casey's story with those you love in your life. The internet is an extremely dangerous place, and we're all at risk. And that is the case of 13-year-old Casey Woody.
This woman's kidnapping story was so bizarre, many, including police, thought it was a hoax. This is the case of Denise Huskins.
In 2015 in Vallejo, California, Denise and Aaron Quinn began dating. They both worked as physical therapists and were a cute couple according to friends. But they had been having some issues as Denise found out that Aaron had been cheating with an ex. The two were having a hard time but trying to work it out. On March 22nd at 3 a.m., the couple was upstairs sleeping at home when they woke up to find an intruder had broken in and was in their bedroom in a wetsuit.
The intruder then tells Aaron to give him his computer and bank account information.
He then forced the couple to put on swimming goggles that had been covered in duct tape and put headphones on. The intruder was also reportedly telling them how good they were doing throughout the entire ordeal. He gave them both a sedative, took Denise, and told Aaron he'd contact him via text with ransom demands. The next day, Aaron woke up from the sedative. The intruder told him not to call police, so Aaron fell back asleep, but later in the day made the call.
Aaron tells police what happened, but to them, the story sounds far-fetched.
Aaron's cheating and the couple's recent relationship issues made police suspicious of him. A massive manhunt ensued. 140 police and FBI searched all over for Denise. When suddenly, 48 hours later, Denise reappears, seemingly unharmed in Huntington Beach, California, 400 miles away from where she was taken. She said her captor had released her in her hometown on the street she grew up on. Denise told police a similar story to what Aaron had told them and said she was taken by a man to his home in Lake Tahoe where horrible things happened. Then said he just decided to release her, drove her all the way to Huntington Beach, dropped her off near her dad's home, and then drove away.
Twists and turns, but police weren't buying any of it.
The story was so elaborate it almost seemed like the plot of a thriller movie. Many began comparing Denise's story to the plot of Gone Girl. Boyfriend or husband is caught cheating, girl leaves, and then pins it on the spouse. Police said they felt they had wasted resources and declared the whole thing a hoax. Both Aaron and Denise hired attorneys. But a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle started receiving anonymous messages from someone claiming responsibility for the crime. 2 months later, police got reports of another home invasion near San Francisco, another couple, and the stories were eerily similar. The intruder ran away but left his cell phone at the scene. They tracked that phone to this man. Matthew Muller, a 38-year-old Harvard-trained attorney and ex-Marine. His property is searched, and what do they find in his possession?
Aaron's stolen laptop. Go to part 2. This is the case of Denise Huskins, part 2.
After another home invasion similar to Denise and Aaron's, the suspect, Matthew Muller, was found, searched, and taken into custody. They find Aaron's stolen computer in Muller's possession and immediately start putting 2 and 2 together. Denise and Aaron did not make up this entire thing. The man who was guilty had been caught. Strangely, Muller had used a remote-controlled drone to spy on Denise and Aaron before the entire ordeal. He eventually confessed and was sentenced to 40 years behind bars and was just sentenced to another 31 years. Denise and Aaron were vindicated and won a settlement of $2.5 million from the Vallejo police. but say the whole thing and what they went through was traumatizing. The two are now married with a child. I can't imagine. This is one of the craziest cases I've ever heard of. What are your thoughts?